Is Peter Stark a Thing? By Forrestwarriorz. Chapter 6. Bucky. Bucky groaned as he stepped away from the punching bags. He grabbed a bottle of water and cracked it open before sweeping his gaze around the almost empty room. No one else was with him, just the way Bucky preferred it. Though he knew he could no longer become the Winter Soldier, Bucky still didn't really trust himself around others. Steve understood, as much as he could, and Bucky would forever be grateful that Tony Stark had shown him how to black out the windows, blocking him from seeing other people or other people seeing him. Even though Bucky thought it was excessive, but it was well-meaning. He ran a hand through his hair. Maybe he should cut it. It was becoming really annoying when it came to training. It got all sweaty and stuck to his neck and forehead. But even pulling it back didn't stop it from getting in the way. Bucky tilted his head back and sucked in a deep breath. The scent of his sweat filled the room. The sounds of the building around him seemed to grow louder, pressing against all sides of his body, and Bucky quickly raised a hand to one of his ears. The cool metal of his hand soothed the warm skin before it became too overwhelming. Footsteps resonated around him, and Bucky found his chest tightening. It was a slight pressure from an unseen force, something he had not experienced since the Accords were cleared up. His left hand lowered to his chest to try and grasp the hands pressing against his chest, but of course there was nothing there. Before it could push into a full-blown-out panic attack, the door clicked open. "Hello?" The sound of the door and the voice was loud. A scream. A shout. Pressing against Bucky, but at the same time, it was pulling away the thing that clutched at him. Desperately, as if he was its salvation. Bucky shook himself out of his stupor and turned to face the owner of the voice. That voice was familiar to him. Where had he heard it before? Except he saw a teenager standing in the doorway, eyes wide as he stared at Bucky. He looked barely to be a young adult. Fluffy brown hair was in a mess, and there was a faint streak of oil within it. Brown eyes were studying Bucky closely, but didn't seem to be in a hurry to leave. Bucky froze, eyes widening as he studied the teen. He shifted his feet slightly and rubbed the back of his neck as he stepped into the room. Why wasn't he running? Why wasn't he scared? Bucky didn't understand. The teenager didn't seem too fazed to be stuck in a room with him. Then again, he openly stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. Sorry, sir. It's just that Friday informed me that you were suffering a panic attack, or at least on the verge of one, the teen explained as he continued to rub the back of his neck. Bucky blinked again. Oh. I can leave if you'd like. He motioned towards the door. I was actually looking for a place to do some fighting practice. Bucky paused. What? Why? Why would a teenager need to know how to fight? The teenager coughed. Well, I'm an intern at Stark Industries. We're all required to know how to fight to defend ourselves. Interns aren't really required to do so, but we're allowed to participate. That made some sense. Not too much, but Bucky wasn't going to question it. He briefly remembered that Stark Industries used to sell weapons, so perhaps it was just a side effect of that time. A time long past that Bucky was aware of and thankful for. Oh, right. Bucky cleared his throat, unease tugging at his mind. So, is there a reason why you're here? The teenager startled. Oh, I was going to ask someone willing to train me hand to hand. I haven't found anyone else. The implication was so clear that Bucky was now beginning to wonder if the teenager was deliberately looking for him. Are you trying to say something? Well, yes, but only if you want to. I can leave. The teenager motioned towards the door. But perhaps I can be here in case you have a panic attack again. I do know how to handle them and help people through them. Bucky looked back at the door. I mean, if you really don't mind, I can show you a few tips and tricks I know, that you can handle. The teenager grinned and held up his arm out to Bucky. I'm Peter Parker, sir. Bucky paused before shaking his hand, wondering where he had heard that voice before, but reasoned he must have heard him around the building. He noticed how Peter glanced towards his new arm and seemed to be on the verge of saying something, but caught himself.
Bucky Barnes.
Bucky lost track of time as he trained and assisted Peter in his fighting stance and skills. He was legitimately surprised at how good his instincts were when it came to fighting, but he knew that he relied too much with his feet when it came to landing any hits. Peter was nervous and apprehensive when it came to throwing punches.
Come on, kid.
Bucky noticed that there was a flicker of annoyance that flashed through Peter's eyes, but was gone so quickly he couldn't really be sure he'd even seen them.
You can throw some punches harder than that. I can take it.
Peter huffed and muttered something under his breath. It was so quiet that not even Bucky's ears picked up on what he had said. That actually caught his attention. Peter must have known about his enhanced senses in order to evade being heard by him.
What was that, kid?
Don't call me kid, Peter muttered louder this time, but his voice sounded harder. Just don't. Please. Bucky raised his brows, but didn't bother arguing. Okay, so the teenager was clearly annoyed with being referred to as a kid. Not like Bucky would even consider him an adult either. Though the way he carried himself in the fighting room showed that he was mentally older than he was. It didn't seem like the lanky teen that had first stepped into the room, all nervousness and jitters. They were like two completely different people. The sight was slightly unnerving. It wasn't too strange to see someone becoming another person, but it still seemed as though Peter was hiding something. After dealing with Steve his entire life, Bucky would consider himself an expert at picking up on whenever someone was hiding a part of themselves from strangers. That, or they are trying to make themselves look bigger and better.
Alright, so like I was saying, you can punch a little harder. I can...
Bucky began to speak.
Kid, where are you?
Tony Stark's voice rang out from down the hall. It was too far to be heard by normal humans, but Bucky instinctively stiffened and backed away from the teenager. Peter's eyes widened as he watched Bucky before he turned his head towards the door, almost as if he could hear Tony's voice. That was pretty impossible, though. While it was clear to Bucky, why would it be clear to just a normal teen? Unless, of course, Bucky just thought it was further away because of how focused he had previously been. Shit, Bucky knew that he still wasn't trusted nor liked by Tony Stark, and that he was going to be in hot water if Tony entered the room while he was sparring with Peter. It wasn't really sparring, though, just assisting in some fighting practice. Peter didn't seem to mind too much, and his shoulders had slumped as an annoyed but resigned expression flickered onto his face before settling into something unreadable. He should probably leave.
The door opened. Kid, Friday told me you were in here.
Tony stopped as his gaze landed on Peter and then Bucky behind him. His eyes grew wide before they hardened into a familiar emotion that Bucky was well versed in. He took a step back, suddenly being acutely aware of the fact that there was no other escape route out of the room. Unless he went through the window, but he doubted Friday would even let him out. Not unless Tony said he could leave, which he heavily doubted.
What's going on here? Tony's voice grew harsh as he stared directly at Bucky. Why were you around my kid? Wait, his kid?
Bucky did a double take at Tony's words, though it didn't seem like him nor Peter were even aware of what he had said.
Look, it's not what it might appear like.
Bucky tried to collect his thoughts, but his body was pushing him into flight mode. He couldn't properly word anything to make sense.
You...
Mr. Stark! Peter cried, and he suddenly leaped in between Tony and Bucky.
Pete.
Tony stared at him.
What's going on?
He was just helping me with some fighting techniques, I swear. Peter said, looking back at Bucky. He was having a mild panic attack, and Friday informed me, so I came here. I figured that perhaps it would help him calm down and focus on something like assisting me with fighting. It helped, I think. Bucky knew he should confirm it. It was true after all. Tony looked up and stared at Bucky intensely. Bucky wanted to look away, but found himself unable to. Tony's eyes were unreadable, but seemed to study Bucky closely, to try and figure out whether or not Peter was telling the truth. Peter seemed like a trustworthy teenager, but Bucky knew that Tony would want to clarify it for himself, to confirm that Bucky was not a threat, or someone he needed to be wary of.
Fine.
Tony turned back to Peter.
This doesn't mean much at all, Barnes. Don't think too much about it.
Bucky found his shoulders relaxing.
That's fine. You were just protecting your kid after all.
Tony didn't say anything, and that was probably spiking Bucky's curiosity more than anything else that ever has. He didn't argue with his statement. That was intriguing enough by itself. Not including the whole enigma that was Peter Parker. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, proper intense there. Poor Bucky. And poor Tony. And God bless Peter. The boy's an angel in this, isn't he? He's trying so hard. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.